Harlan Greaves didn't expect the woman in heels to topple into his arms right as his 5-year-old son screamed from the muddy trail behind them. "Sir, please, my foot think it's stuck," the woman cried, clutching his arm for balance. He barely caught her before she landed face first into the muck. Her sleek black coat was already splattered, her hair sticking to her cheeks from the light drizzle. She looked completely out of place in the middle of a Louisiana swamp trail. He blinked at her, then glanced back at the narrow, flooded path they'd just come through. "Dad, the lizard's back," Ryder yelled, hopping on one foot, trying not to cry. "Stay by the tree, Rye," Harlan called out, then turned to the woman. "You okay?" She looked down at her soaked shoes and grimaced. "Do I look okay?" He gave her a dry look. Didn't think anyone else would be dumb enough to take this trail after the storm. "I'm not dumb," she snapped, then softened. "Just lost. My GPS rerouted me, something about construction." Harlan exhaled. "Of course." He reached down and grabbed her by the waist. "Hold on." "What are you, oh?" She yelped as he hoisted her up, bridal style. She clutched his shoulders, clearly stunned. "I can walk." "You're wearing $1,000 shoes, lady. That swamp will eat you alive." Her eyes widened. "How would you know how much they cost?" "I don't," he said without looking at her. "I just know they cost more than my truck." She blinked, lips parting. "Wait, are you seriously going to carry me?" "I don't have time to argue," he muttered, adjusting her weight. "My son's terrified of lizards, and we're already late." "For what?" "His school," he said, "and my shift. I don't have time to leave strangers behind." He trudged forward through the muddy trail, boots sinking slightly with every step. Ryder followed close behind, arms out for balance, tongue sticking out in concentration. The woman stared at him. "You don't even know my name." "I don't need your name to carry you." She tilted her head. "It's Fallon Devlin." "Harlan Greaves," he replied, not slowing. "And that's Ryder." "Hi," Ryder chirped, waving at her with a muddy hand. Fallon smiled faintly. "Hi, Ryder. Sorry for slowing your dad down." "It's okay," Ryder said seriously. "He carries me when I get scared too." Harlan grunted. "You get scared every time we pass a squirrel." Fallon stifled a laugh. By the time they reached the gravel road, her heels were ruined, her coat was dripping, and Harlan's shirt was soaked through. He finally set her down beside his beat-up Chevy truck. She looked at the truck, then at him. "You're really just a dad." "Struggling one," he muttered. "Single, broke, and late. You need a ride." She hesitated. I was headed to Magnolia Ridge. There's a property I'm supposed to look at." His brows rose. "The old Carrington estate." She blinked. "Yes." He whistled. "That place is a swamp magnet. No wonder your GPS lost its mind. You'll need a boat just to get to the front porch." She laughed under her breath. "And here I thought I'd be touring it in heels." "Yes, good luck with that," he said, opening the passenger door for her. She froze. "Wait, you're offering me a ride." He gave her a look. "You want to walk back through that?" She slid into the passenger seat, trying to brush mud off her coat. Ryder climbed into the back, already humming a cartoon theme. "You're not a guide or anything?" she asked. "Nope," he said, starting the engine. "Just a mechanic who happened to be in your way." She looked at his hands, calloused, oil under his nails, and yet gentle when he held her. Fallon sat quiet for a moment, watching him drive. "You live around here?" she asked. 2 blocks from the shop," he replied. "I work at Grady's Auto." "And your son?" "He's in kindergarten. I drop him off, fix cars, pick him up, cook dinner, try not to pass out before 8. She smiled. "That's a full-time life." He glanced at her. "What about you? What kind of heels get stuck in swamps?" She grinned, the expensive kind. He raised a brow. I'm not a realtor, she offered, more like the buyer. He blinked. You're buying the Carrington place, that thing's a wreck. I know, I want to turn it into a wellness retreat. He looked skeptical but didn't comment. Instead, he nodded toward the diner up ahead. You're not going to get far in that outfit. Want some coffee while I drop him off? She hesitated. I don't want to be a burden. You already are, he said plainly. Might as well get a muffin out of it. Fallon laughed, and for the first time in days, it didn't feel forced. The inside of the diner smelled like cinnamon rolls and bacon. Fallon sat at the booth by the window, while Harlan walked Ryder into the school across the street. She watched him through the window how he knelt to fix Ryder's jacket, ruffled his hair, then jogged back across with long, confident strides. Thanks for not leaving me in the swamp, she said when he slid into the booth opposite her. He shrugged, didn't have much of a choice. You're not exactly charming, she teased. I'm not trying to be. She tilted her head. You always this grumpy. He looked her straight in the eye. You always this nosy. She grinned, only when I'm interested. That caught him off guard. He blinked, then cleared his throat. Well, here's your muffin. He pushed the plate toward her and stood. I gotta get to work. She rose too. Wait, can I pay you for the ride? No. At least let me. Don't need your money. He walked out before she could argue. Fallon stood there stunned, muffin in hand, heart beating faster than it should have. She stared at the door he just walked out of. She was used to men who tripped over themselves to impress her, who Googled her net worth before the second date. But Harlan, he didn't even ask for her last name. And yet, he'd carried her through mud without blinking. Outside, Harlan climbed into his truck, running a hand through his damp hair. He didn't know who the hell Fallon Devlin really was, but he hadn't carried a woman in his arms in years, and he hadn't wanted to kiss a stranger even longer. He shook his head. She was trouble, fancy trouble, and he didn't have time for that. Still, he found himself glancing in the rearview mirror, watching the diner door, wondering if she'd come after him. She didn't. And yet, he couldn't stop thinking about the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. Or the way she'd said, only when I'm interested. Fallon stood at the edge of the Carrington estate's crumbling gate, her boots sinking slightly into the squishy earth beneath her. The real estate agent was already 20 minutes late, and her phone had no signal. She adjusted the strap of her leather bag and eyed the mansion beyond the overgrowth. The white pillars were weather-stained, the wrought iron balcony sagged on one side, and vines crawled up the brick like it was being slowly strangled by the land itself. Still, she could see it. The retreat center, her vision, glass conservatories, meditation gardens, a full spa tucked into the back wing. She just needed the right contractors, the right permits, and someone who wouldn't charge her 3 times the cost just because she had an uptown address. Looks like you made it out of the swamp alive, came a voice behind her. She turned, startled. Harlan stood at the edge of the path, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and a heavy toolbox in his hand. His shirt stuck to his chest from the humidity, and a bandage covered a cut just beneath his collarbone. I asked around, he said before she could respond. You're looking at a full foundation rebuild. That place is sitting on a sinkhole. Fallon folded her arms. Are you always this encouraging? I'm just saying you might want to get a second opinion before you drop a fortune into a patch of mud and memories. She arched a brow. And you're qualified to give advice on historic properties now. No, but I've pulled enough trucks out of these back roads to know what kind of land you're dealing with. She considered him for a moment. Why'd you come back? He set the bag down. Saw you walk in while I was leaving the shop. Figured you might need help getting through the gate. Fallon touched the rusted metal latch. I've seen worse. No doubt, he said, but you don't dress for worse. You dress like the city doesn't touch you. She glanced down at her outfit. So what, I should show up in overalls. He didn't laugh. I'm not judging. I'm just wondering why someone like you's trying to fix this place when she could buy a building that doesn't need a miracle. Fallon stepped past him toward the cracked stone steps leading to the porch. Because miracles come with stories, and I need this one. He watched her as she took each step slowly, like she was stepping into a memory. She ran her hand along the porch column, then turned to him. Ever heard of the Devlin family? He narrowed his eyes. Isn't that the family that used to run those distribution warehouses up in Baton Rouge? She nodded. My grandfather built them. My father expanded them. I sold most of it 6 months ago. He leaned against the railing, arms folded. You're sitting on a fortune. I used to be, she said. Now I'm sitting on a plan. This place is step one. That why you didn't tell me who you were yesterday? She met his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Probably, he said honestly. I wouldn't have carried you. Fallon tilted her head. Because of pride. He didn't flinch. Because women like you don't usually stay long enough for mud to matter. She walked toward him, the boards creaking under her feet. What if told you I'm not like the women you think I am? He didn't look away. Then I'd say you're trying real hard to convince yourself of that. Before she could respond, a car rumbled up the drive. An older man stepped out, clipboard in hand, muttering apologies for being late. I'll be quick, he told her, but you'll want to brace yourself. The water damage in the east wing's worse than we thought. Harlan turned to leave, but Fallon caught his arm. Wait. He looked down at her hand, then back at her. Could you stay, she asked, just for an hour. I need someone who doesn't sugarcoat things. He stared for a moment, then gave a single nod. Fine, but I'm not crawling under the floorboards. Inside, the house smelled like mildew and forgotten dreams. Sunlight filtered through cracked windows, highlighting floating dust and peeling wallpaper. As the agent led them through the rooms, Fallon took notes while Harlan paced silently, occasionally tapping his knuckle against a loose beam or scraping a boot against water-stained panels. In what used to be a ballroom, she stopped near the fireplace. The mantel was still intact. Above it, a portrait hung askew, a woman in a flowing blue dress, her smile faded with time. My great-aunt used to throw winter galas here, Fallon murmured. People would come from all over the state. It was the only time this town saw tuxedos. Harlan stood beside her, and now it's termites and broken windows. She looked at him. That's why I want to bring it back, not just for me, for everyone who remembers what it was. He didn't say anything, but his gaze softened. As they exited through the back, the agent pointed toward a collapsed gazebo. You'll need to rebuild that entire section. Storm last year took half the roof. Fallon turned to Harlan. If I asked you to look over the structure with your team just to verify everything, would you? I don't have a team, he said. It's just me and sometimes my cousin if he's not sleeping off a hangover. Then just you. He hesitated. You really want my opinion? I trust it more than someone who's trying to upsell me on repairs, she said. He rubbed the back of his neck. All right, I'll come back tomorrow. Bring Ryder, she added. There's a piano in the West Hall he might like. That stopped him. How'd you know he plays? I didn't, she said, but he hums in tune. That usually means something. He didn't answer, just nodded once before turning toward the path. Fallon watched him go until the trees swallowed his figure. Then she turned back to the house, her heart thrumming with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the dust. Or maybe it was the man who didn't ask her for a thing, yet made her want to offer everything. And she didn't even know what scared her more. The next morning, Fallon was already sweeping broken glass from the west hallway floor when she heard the sound of tires crunching gravel. She paused, broom in hand, and peeked through the warped window. Harlan stepped out of his truck, followed by Ryder, who was holding a paper bag and looking around with quiet curiosity. Fallon opened the door before they reached it. "You're early," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I was already up," Harlan replied. "Ryder wanted to see the piano." Ryder handed her the bag. "We brought you cornbread. My dad made it last night." She crouched to his level. "That's very kind of you, thank you." Ryder gave her a shy look. "Do you have ghosts in here?" Harlan sighed. "He's been asking that since we left the house." Fallon straightened. "Only the friendly kind." They stepped inside, and Ryder immediately veered toward the back hall where Fallon had unearthed the upright piano. She led Harlan toward a sagging stairwell near the kitchen. "The joists under this section are splitting," she said. "The agent said I'd need to replace the entire support structure, but I want to see if there's a way to reinforce instead." He crouched near the base, tapping the wood with a knuckle, then reached into his bag for a flashlight. "This was patched before looks like someone tried a quick fix with pine sheets. That's why it's giving out," he said, angling the light. "If you use cedar, you might save the frame, but it's gonna be tight. You'll need someone who knows how to brace it mid-support." "I'll find someone," she said, "unless you're volunteering." He stood. "I don't do full builds." "I'm not asking you to," she said, "but trust your eye. I need someone to tell me when I'm being stupid." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "You're not stupid, just stubborn." Fallon crossed her arms. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's not," he said after a pause, "but it can get you hurt." She met his gaze, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The sound of a single piano key being pressed floated through the air. Fallon turned toward the hallway. He found the middle C. Harlan followed, watching his son tap the keys slowly. One by one, his lips pressed together in thought. "He's careful," Fallon noted. "He's always watching," Harlan said. "Doesn't speak much in new places." Ryder looked up. "Can I play even if it's missing notes?" "Of course," Fallon said. "Missing notes just mean you have to be more creative." He nodded, then began pressing keys in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Harlan leaned against the doorframe. "He's never had lessons. Taught him a few things on my mother's keyboard. Thought it might help with his focus." Fallon sat on the worn bench beside Ryder, her fingers hovering above the keys. She played a soft arpeggio with the few working notes, and Ryder joined in, mimicking her hand movements. "You're good with kids," Harlan said. "I was the oldest of 6 cousins," she replied without looking up. "I learned fast or got left behind." He watched the way she guided Ryder's hand gently, never correcting, just encouraging. "You think this place can hold people again?" he asked. Fallon finally looked at him. "I think it's waiting for someone to believe in it." He folded his arms. "That sounds like something you say when you're about to waste money." She smiled. "It probably is." Later, as Ryder explored the garden ruins with a stick in hand, Fallon and Harlan sat on the back steps, sipping lemonade she had made from a packet she found in one of the emergency kits she always traveled with. Harlan stared out at the overgrown trellis. "My father used to build things. Barns, mostly. He never stayed long in one place, but when he did, he left something behind. A porch swing, a chicken coop. He said building was the only way he knew how to say he loved something." Fallon turned to him. "Do you build anything now?" He rubbed his jaw, stopped after he passed, didn't make sense anymore. "You could start again." He gave her a look. "I don't have time for projects that don't pay." "What if they did pay?" He narrowed his eyes. What are you getting at? I'm offering you a job, she said. Help me get this place cleaned up. I'll pay you fair, no handouts. He shook his head. I don't take jobs that come with strings. There are no strings, she said. Just a week-by-week agreement. You tell me what's possible, and I decide what we keep. He studied her for a long moment. You really think this place can work? I think it already is, she said, nodding toward Ryder, who was now balancing on a stone edge, arms out like wings. Harlan looked away. I'll think about it. Fair enough, she replied. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of birds and distant traffic filling the space between them. A breeze passed through the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of honeysuckle and wet wood. I never asked, Fallon said softly. Why did you carry me instead of just leaving me there? He didn't answer right away. Then, because you looked like you didn't know how to ask for help. She swallowed. I didn't. He stood. You do now. As they walked back toward the front, Ryder ran ahead, arms full of stones he'd collected. Fallon glanced at the truck, then back at Harlan. Dinner tomorrow, she said. My place. I'll cook. He gave her a look. You don't even know if I like your cooking. Then come find out. He hesitated, then nodded once. All right. She opened the door for Ryder, who scrambled in, still humming the tune they'd made up. Fallon watched them drive off, the taillights disappearing behind the trees. She stood alone on the front step, her fingers still tingling from the piano, from the way he'd looked at her when she wasn't trying to impress him. She didn't recognize this feeling. But she knew it wasn't going away. Fallon wiped her palms on the apron tied around her waist, glancing once more at the dining table. The cloth napkins were folded, the plates already set with roasted chicken, rosemary potatoes, and sautéed squash she had picked up that morning from a roadside farm stand. She'd never cooked for anyone she wanted to impress. Business partners, yes. Dignitaries, donors, even former boyfriends who didn't know the difference between truffle oil and olive. But not like this. Not for someone who didn't care about the wine pairing or the thread count of a tablecloth. The knock came just as she was lighting the last candle. She opened the door to find Harlan holding a brown paper bag and Ryder in a navy hoodie, eyes wide as he took in the flickering lights through the windows. Hope you're not expecting dessert from us, Harlan said. We brought lemonade and a deck of cards. Fallon stepped aside. I made strawberry crumble, but you can teach me poker after. Inside, Ryder made himself comfortable at the table, already reaching for the pitcher. Fallon poured him a glass, then turned to Harlan, who stood quietly, his eyes scanning the room. You cleaned this place up fast, he said, nodding toward the now uncovered hardwood floors and freshly painted walls. I had help, she replied. 3 retirees from the local church offered to paint in exchange for lunch and stories. He pulled out a chair and sat. That's the smartest trade I've heard all week. Dinner passed in a rhythm that felt unfamiliar and yet easy. Ryder talked more than usual, describing a class project involving painted birdhouses, and Fallon listened with real interest, asking questions that made him grin between bites. Harlan watched the exchange without interrupting, his fork idle at one point, gaze lingering on the way Fallon leaned forward when Ryder spoke like nothing else mattered. After they cleared the dishes, Harlan helped dry while Fallon washed. The kitchen had no dishwasher, but she didn't mind. The soft clink of plates and the sound of Ryder humming in the other room grounded her in a way that no skyline view ever had. You always live like this? Harlan asked, drying the last plate. She raised a brow. Like what? This, he gestured around the space. Cooking your own food, cleaning your own floors, inviting strangers to dinner. You're not a stranger, she said. Not anymore. He set the towel down. Still doesn't answer the question. Fallon turned off the tap. Used to have a staff, driver, chef. someone who organized my calendar down to the hour, but it stopped feeling like my life. He leaned back against the counter. So you gave it up. I gave up what didn't feel real, she said. Turns out money buys a lot of things, but it doesn't buy peace. Harlan crossed his arms. And this place gives you peace. I think you do. He didn't respond, but his jaw shifted slightly, like he was holding back words too heavy to drop carelessly. Ryder appeared at the doorway. Can we play now? They sat on the living room rug, cards scattered between them. Fallon lost every hand, mostly on purpose, though she didn't admit it. Ryder declared himself champion and began building a house of cards, focused and quiet. Harlan watched him for a moment, then turned to Fallon. He asked if he could come back tomorrow, he said. I was hoping he would. He doesn't warm up to people easy. She's not people, Ryder said without looking up. She's Fallon. Fallon's throat tightened. After Ryder fell asleep on the couch mid-card tower, Harlan carried him to the guest room and laid him on the bed. Fallon handed him a folded blanket, and he adjusted it over Ryder's small frame with a tenderness so instinctive it made her chest ache. They stepped into the hallway, voices low. I can take him home, Harlan said. Didn't mean to keep him out so late. He can stay if you want, she offered. The room's quiet and the back door locks. He hesitated. I didn't come here to stay. I know, she said, but maybe you don't have to leave yet. He studied her, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. I hope that's a good thing. It is, he said, but it scares me. She stepped closer. Why? Because I've built my whole life around simple things. My son, my job, things I can fix with my hands. You're not simple. Fallon reached for his hand. Then let me be complicated with you. He held her gaze for a long moment before he kissed her slow, certain, like he needed to memorize the shape of her mouth before the moment passed. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. I didn't think could want something that might change everything. Fallon rested her forehead against his. You're not the only one. He stayed. They didn't talk much after that, just sat on the porch in the dark, the night humming with crickets and the scent of rain in the air. She leaned against his shoulder, and he rested his arm around her like it had always belonged there. By morning, she made pancakes, and Ryder declared them better than the diners. Harlan didn't argue. Later that week, Fallon signed the final deed for the Carrington estate. The first check she wrote was to Harlan, with a note that simply read, "Let's build something worth remembering." He didn't cash it right away, but he framed the note. Fallon didn't leave Magnolia Ridge. Not because she had to stay, but because for the first time, she wanted to. And Harlan, he stopped keeping his heart behind calloused hands. Because the woman he carried through the swamp had carried him right back into the kind of life. He'd stopped believing in the kind with music in the hallway, cornbread at dinner, and a love that didn't need fixing. Only choosing, every day, again and again. The first guests arrived sooner than expected. Fallon stood beside the freshly painted entry doors of the Carrington estate, now officially registered, as the Wild Magnolia Retreat, watching a silver sedan pull slowly into the gravel drive. A woman in her 60s stepped out, her hand resting on the car roof as she looked up at the restored columns with tears already gathering in her eyes. I used to dance in that parlor, the woman said quietly. Your aunt gave me my first waltz lesson. Fallon smiled, heart full. Then you're exactly who we hoped would come back. The woman reached for her hand. Thank you for bringing her home. After she disappeared inside, Fallon turned to the man beside her. Harlan wore a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, and jeans that carried a smear of primer at the knee. His hair was still damp from a shower, and the scent of cedar soap clung faintly to him. You didn't tell me we were opening today, he said. I didn't want fanfare, she replied. Just faces that remembered what this place was before it fell apart. He looked toward the drive, where a second car was pulling in. You built it back. We built it, she corrected. They walked side by side through the garden path, past blooming lilies and new lantern posts. The greenhouse glass had been replaced, the guest rooms furnished with reclaimed pieces she and Harlan had sourced from local estates and auctions. Every room had something old, something hand-touched. Inside, Ryder sat behind the baby grand piano they had moved into the main hall, his fingers trailing softly over the new keys. His music teacher sat beside him, nodding as he counted through a scale. Fallon paused at the doorway, watching the boy's shoulders relax with each note. He's getting more confident, she said. He believes in what he hears now, Harlan replied. That's new. They moved into the kitchen, where staff bustled quietly, prepping trays of fresh pastries and tea. Fallon handed a clipboard to the retreat coordinator, who nodded and disappeared down the hallway. I've got something for you, Harlan said, pulling a velvet pouch from his jacket pocket. You already built me a greenhouse, she teased. He opened the pouch and revealed a key antique brass, with a delicate rose carved into the head. What's this for? He turned it in her palm. Come see. They walked to the western side of the property, past the old stable that had been converted into a yoga studio. Near the cedar grove, a small cottage stood newly sided, its windows glowing faintly from within. Fallon paused at the threshold. You finished it. I had help, he said. Your painter friends came back, brought cookies and opinions. She stepped inside. The air smelled of fresh wood and linen. The front room held a writing desk by the window, a fireplace with a hand-laid stone surround, and a pair of reading chairs that looked like they'd been sitting there forever, even though they hadn't. You said you wanted a quiet place, Harlan said. Somewhere to write, think, breathe. She turned slowly. It feels like a memory, haven't lived yet. I figured we could make some here. Fallon stepped into his arms, resting her head on his chest. You always know what I need before I do. That's because I watch you, he said. The way you step toward things that scare you. The way you fight for something everyone else gave up on. She lifted her face to his. You never gave up on me. Never even thought about it, he said, kissing her softly. They stayed like that, the cottage quiet around them, the future settling into place like it had always been waiting. Later that evening, as twilight fell and string lights flickered to life across the garden, Fallon stood on the back terrace in a navy dress that whispered around her ankles. Harlan joined her, now in a light blazer, hair still damp from the pond where Ryder had dared him to jump earlier. Guests mingled around fire pits, laughter trailing like music. The retreat's first weekend was a soft opening, but it already felt like more. Fallon turned to Harlan. Do you realize what you've given me? You gave me a reason to stop running, he said simply. That's not nothing. Ryder came bounding up the stairs then, cheeks flushed, holding a plate of something sticky. I saved you both the last peach tart, he announced triumphantly. Fallon bent down and kissed the top of his head. You're my favorite person tonight. Harlan lifted his brow. Only tonight. Don't push your luck, she teased. They sat in the swing he had built at the edge of the terrace, the three of them sharing the tart as fireflies gathered in the dark. Ryder leaned into Fallon's side, already half asleep, and Harlan's arm wrapped around them both. The stars stretched wide above, and something in the air felt like promise. Not the kind you made with words. The kind you lived every day. Months later, the retreat became a quiet success, not because it was the most luxurious, but because it was the most loved. Writers came to finish books, couples came to remember why they fell in love, and people who had once danced in forgotten rooms came back to find them full again. Harlan took on more projects at the estate, never leaving town again. Ryder thrived in school and started piano recitals in the Great Hall, often dedicating songs to the woman who had taught him to play even when keys were missing. And Fallon, she became the heart of the place. Not because she owned it, but because she had saved it and let it save her right back. One summer morning, beneath the arch of wild magnolias in full bloom, Harlan held her hand and said, "I don't need vows to tell you what I already know, but I'll say them anyway." She laughed through tears. "I love you more than I knew I could." They didn't marry in a grand ballroom or on a rooftop. They married here, where mud had once swallowed her heels, and a stranger had carried her without question. Where foundations were rebuilt not just in wood and stone, but in love. And every day after that, they chose each other. Not because they had to, but because they couldn't imagine not.